It started with a rope, tied around the waist of a 72-year-old woman, dragged across a driveway she had owned for nearly 3 decades. The crowd watched. Some filmed. Others turned away. The enforcers, who called themselves HOA security, smirked, tugging at the line as though corralling an animal. But this was no animal. This was Evelyn Carter, a grandmother, a retired schoolteacher, a pillar of her community. And what the HOA didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that Evelyn had 2 sons, both Navy men, both trained, both unforgiving when it came to their mother. This wasn't just a violation of HOA bylaws. This was a declaration of war. The incident took place in Lakewood Estates, a gated community just outside Jacksonville, Florida. Lakewood was the kind of neighborhood built on appearances. Perfect lawns, identical mailboxes, neighbors waving at each other with forced smiles. But beneath the manicured hedges was a board that ruled like kings, the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association. And the HOA had one mission: control. Evelyn Carter had lived there since the early 90s. She raised 2 boys in that house, Kelvin and Anthony Carter, both of whom would later join the U.S. Navy. Evelyn wasn't flashy. She wasn't political. She just wanted peace, a garden in her yard, flowers by the porch, a place to sit on warm evenings. But in Lakewood Estates, peace had a price, and Evelyn was about to pay it. It began with a letter. Notice of violation, unauthorized yard display. The display was a small wooden angel Evelyn had placed near her rose bushes, a memorial to her late husband, Samuel, who had passed just 2 years earlier. The HOA president, a heavy-set man named Gerald Whitfield, claimed the angel statue disrupted uniformity. Evelyn ignored the letter. She had no intention of removing something that honored her husband. A week later, another letter arrived. This one harsher, threatening fines. Legal action. Evelyn wrote back, "This is my yard, my property, my memory of my husband. I will not remove it." That's when the visits began. They weren't real police. Everyone in Lakewood knew that, but the HOA hired them anyway. 2 men in black uniforms, cheap metal badges, utility belts with flashlights and batons. They drove around in an unmarked SUV with the word security stenciled on the side. Neighbors called them the HOA cops. Their names were Rick Dalton and Carl Myers, both with checkered pasts, both fired from small security firms for excessive force, and both desperate enough to take orders from Gerald Whitfield. June 15, 2021, a scorching Florida afternoon. Evelyn was outside watering her garden when the SUV pulled up. Dalton and Myers stepped out, uniforms creased, boots heavy. "Mrs. Carter," Dalton barked, "we've warned you. Take down the statue." Evelyn's voice trembled, but she stood firm. "This is my yard. My husband's memory stays." Dalton sneered, "Then you'll come with us." Before Evelyn could react, Myers pulled out a thick rope. Rough, frayed. He looped it around her waist. "You can't." Evelyn gasped, but they yanked. Hard. She stumbled, dropping her watering can. Her knees scraped against the driveway. The rope dug into her side. Neighbors froze. Some lifted their phones. Others shut their blinds. Dalton smirked. "Non-compliant. You're coming to the board." They dragged her across the hot pavement as Evelyn screamed. The video spread within hours. A shaky clip filmed by a teenager across the street. The caption read, "HOA cops dragging Ms. Carter." By evening, it had been shared across Facebook groups. By morning, it hit Twitter. Elderly woman assaulted by HOA security. Lakewood Estates goes too far. But inside the neighborhood, silence. Some neighbors whispered that Evelyn had brought it on herself. Others muttered that the board was just doing their job. No one admitted the truth. They were afraid. Kelvin Carter was the first to see the video. Stationed on the USS Roosevelt, deployed off the coast of Spain, he watched in silence. His hands shook. His jaw locked. Anthony, stationed stateside in Virginia, saw it next. His commanding officer tried to calm him, but Anthony's rage was volcanic. Within 24 hours, Both men were on flights back to Florida. This wasn't just a family matter. This was war. Jacksonville PD finally opened an investigation. Detectives interviewed Evelyn, her voice trembling as she described a rope cutting into her skin. Dalton and Myers insisted they were enforcing HOA bylaws. Whitfield claimed Evelyn was aggressive and a threat to order, but the body cam footage, cheap shaky, told a different story. Non-compliant, Dalton muttered on tape. Drag her, Myers replied. Detectives knew they had enough for assault, but something stalled the process. The HOA board had friends in City Hall. Whitfield had connections with councilmen. And suddenly, paperwork went missing. Reports got misfiled. It was starting to look like Evelyn would never see justice. Kelvin arrived home first. He hugged his mother, seeing the bruises along her ribs. Who did this, he asked. Evelyn whispered their names. Dalton, Myers, Whitfield. Anthony arrived the next day. He didn't speak. He'd just stare at the rope, still lie in the yard where they had left it. I'll handle this, he muttered. The more Kelvin and Anthony dug, the more rot they found. Whitfield had been funneling HOA funds into his own businesses. Dalton and Myers weren't licensed. The security contracts were fake. It wasn't just about a statue. It was about power. And Evelyn had become the board's example. Proof of what happened when you defied them. 2 weeks later, Evelyn received another letter. Remove the statue. Final warning. Non-compliance will result in further action. But this time, the envelope wasn't delivered by mail. It was taped to her door, with a knife stuck through it, and scrawled across the paper in red ink. Next time, it won't be a rope. Dear viewers, this story isn't just about HOA bylaws. It's about corruption, intimidation, and how far men drunk on power will go to break someone who refuses to bend. Evelyn Carter was dragged with a rope, humiliated, bruised, but now her sons were home. 2 Navy men, trained, focused, and the HOA had no idea the storm they had unleashed. Because Kelvin and Anthony weren't just seeking justice. They were preparing for war. Kelvin and Anthony Carter stood in their mother's driveway, the Florida sun casting harsh light on the rope, still coiled near the rose bushes. Evelyn's angel statue remained where it always had been, small, wooden, silent, but now it felt like a battlefield marker. Kelvin clenched his fists. They wanted to humiliate her, make her an example. Anthony's jaw was tight. They picked the wrong family. The Jacksonville police investigation dragged. Detectives came and went, but nothing stuck. Each time the brothers called, they heard excuses, still reviewing evidence, paperwork delays, waiting on approval. It was clear something or someone was stalling. Then came the whispers. Gerald Whitfield, the HOA president, had ties to a city councilman. He donated thousands to campaigns. He played golf with local judges. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as Whitfield wanted. Late one night, Anthony was returning from the store when he saw something taped to the front door. A photo of their mother, Evelyn, standing at her kitchen window. The note beneath read, "We're watching." Anthony stormed inside, slamming it on the table. They're not done. They're escalating. Kelvin's eyes narrowed. Then so do we. Kelvin, ever the strategist, began digging through public HOA records. He found discrepancies. Budgets that didn't match, maintenance fees that vanished, contract with companies that didn't exist. Anthony, the blunt instrument, pressed neighbors quietly. Some were terrified, whispering about late-night visits from Whitfield security. Others admitted they paid fines they didn't know just to avoid trouble. It wasn't just about Evelyn's angel statue. It was about control, fear, extortion. Lakewood Estates wasn't community. It was a racket. Out of nowhere, a knock at the door. Angela Ramirez, a local reporter, stood there with a recorder in hand. "I've been following your mother's case," she said. "I think this goes deeper than anyone knows." She revealed her research. Whitfield had embezzled HOA funds into shell companies. Dalton and Myers, the so-called security, had assault charges in other counties. Angela leaned forward. "People are scared to talk. But with you two here, they might finally stand up." Kelvin nodded. Then let's give them something to stand up for. The next day, Whitfield struck back. Evelyn's water was mysteriously shut off. A city utility worker claimed unpaid fees. But the Carters had proof every bill was paid. That night, the family dog, Daisy, vanished from the backyard. They found her hours later, tied to a tree 2 blocks away, shaken but alive. Then the SUV returned. Dalton and Myers parked across the street, just sitting, watching. Anthony stormed out. You want me? Come get me. They didn't move. They just smirked. Kelvin pulled him back. Not here. Not like this. Frustrated, the brothers pushed harder. They demanded updates from detectives, asked for arrests, begged for protection for their mother. But the response was always the same. We're still investigating. One detective pulled Kelvin aside. His voice was low, almost apologetic. Look, Whitfield got friends. Judges, councilmen, even some of us can't touch him. Kelvin stared. So you're telling me the law doesn't work? The detective sighed. I'm telling you, be careful. 2 nights later, it happened. Kelvin was driving home from picking up Evelyn's prescriptions when headlights appeared in his rear-view mirror. The SUV. It tailed him through back streets. Then another vehicle boxed him in. Dalton and Myers stepped out, batons in hand. Kelvin got out slowly, fists clenched. You think you're tough, Navy boy? Dalton sneered. You don't know what tough is. Kelvin shot back. The first swing came fast. But Kelvin was faster. Training kicked in. He dodged, countered, landed a strike that dropped Myers to the pavement. Dalton lunged, rope in hand. But Kelvin twisted it, yanked hard, sending him sprawling. Neighbors' lights flicked on. Phones recorded. By the time police arrived, Dalton and Myers were the ones bloodied on the ground. But instead of cuffing the guards, officers turned to Kelvin. Hand behind your back. One barked. Anthony rushed up, furious. He defended himself. Look at them. But it didn't matter. Dalton and Myers were smirking even through swollen lips. From the shadows, Whitfield watched, smiling. At the station, Kelvin was booked. Assault. Disturbing the peace. The brothers knew it was a setup. Hours later, Whitfield strolled in. Crisp suit, smug grin. He leaned close to Anthony. You want your brother free? Tell your mother to take down the statue. Apologize. Publicly. Otherwise, Kelvin rots. Anthony's blood boiled. But Kelvin's eyes burned with something else. Defiance. This isn't over, Kelvin whispered. Whitfield chuckled. No, it isn't. By the next morning, news outlets were ablaze. Navy sailor arrested after fight, with HOA security. The narrative was flipped. Evelyn was ignored. The guards painted as victims. Angela Ramirez called in a panic. This goes higher than we thought. I have proof Whitfield's been funneling money into city contracts. But if I publish this, I'll need protection. Before Kelvin and Anthony could respond, their phones buzzed. A message. No name. Just a photo. It showed Evelyn, tied to a chair in her own living room, and scrawled across the image in red. Next time, she doesn't get up. The words still echoed in Kelvin's mind. The Navy boys won't make it to trial. He glanced at his brother across the courtroom. Anthony's jaw was set, his fists balled on the defense table. Their mother, Evelyn, sat trembling between them. Whitfield reclined in his chair, smirking like a king untouchable in his castle. The judge banged his gavel, but all Kelvin heard was the ticking clock. The countdown had begun. That night, the Carters were released on bond. Angela Ramirez drove them home, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. They'll come for you, she warned. This town isn't safe for you anymore. When they pulled up to Evelyn's house, the street lights were out. Every bulb smashed. Anthony muttered, "They're sending a message." And then they saw it, spray painted across the garage door in dripping red paint. Dead men don't testify. At 3 a.m., the sound of shattering glass ripped through the house. Kelvin was out of bed in seconds, instinct kicking in. He tackled Anthony to the floor just as bullets shredded the curtains. Evelyn screamed from the next room. Angela yanked her down behind the sofa. A black SUV peeled away from the curb, tires screeching. Kelvin fired one shot back, not to hit, but to warn. The bullet ricocheted off the street lamp. Then silence. Anthony sat up, chest heaving. They just tried to kill us. Kelvin growled, "No, they tried to scare us. Next time, they'll finish the job." Angela arranged for them to hide in a church basement. Old stone walls, wooden pews, flickering candles. Evelyn clutched a rosary, whispering prayers. Anthony paced like a caged animal. "We can't just hide. We need to hit back." Kelvin studied the files Angela had dug up. Whitfield's network spread like a spiderweb. City council members, judges, even police officers on his payroll. "This isn't just an HOA president," Kelvin said. "This is organized crime wearing a suit." One night, as they strategized, Angela's phone buzzed. A text message. "We know where you are." Anthony froze. "Who did you tell?" Angela's face went pale. "No one. I swear." But then the church door creaked open. Two officers stepped inside, their guns drawn. Kelvin Carter, Anthony Carter, "You're coming with us." The brothers raised their hands slowly. But something was off. No badges. No backup. Just two men with dead eyes. Kelvin whispered, "They're not here to arrest us." The first officer lunged. Anthony swung a pew bench into his chest, sending him sprawling. The second aimed his gun at Evelyn. Kelvin launched forward, slamming his shoulder into the man's ribs, knocking the weapon loose. Candles toppled. Flames licked at the carpet. The church echoed with chaos, shouts, punches, splintering wood. Finally, the brothers stood over the two men, unconscious on the floor. Angela's voice trembled. "We can't go to the police. They are the police." As they prepared to flee, a voice came from the shadows. "Not all of us are bought." A detective stepped forward, the same one who had once warned Kelvin to be careful. His name was Detective Harris. "I know what Whitfield is," he said, "and I've been gathering evidence. But I can't do it alone. They'll kill me before I get a warrant." Kelvin narrowed his eyes. "So why trust us?" Harris replied, "Because they've already marked you for dead. That makes you dangerous and desperate. And desperate men are the only ones who can take him down." Harris revealed a warehouse full of files Whitfield used as backups, blackmail, contracts, payoff ledgers. "If we can get those documents," Harris said, "we can burn his empire to the ground." Anthony grinned. "Sounds like a mission." Evelyn touched her son's hands, tears in her eyes. "Promise me one thing. Don't let them bury this truth like they buried your father's." Her words cut like knives. Kelvin nodded. "We'll end this." The warehouse was guarded by Whitfield's men, Dalton Myers, and at least half a dozen others. Kelvin and Anthony moved like soldiers. Silent, precise. One guard dropped a chokehold. Another went down to Anthony's elbow. Angela recorded everything, whispering commentary into her mic. They reached the office inside. Filing cabinets, stacks of ledgers, a laptop still glowing. Harris shoved documents into a bag. This is it. Enough to sink him. But just as they turned to leave, floodlights roared to life. Dozens of men surrounded the warehouse, armed, waiting. Whitfield's voice boomed through a loudspeaker. "You think you can steal from me? This is my world, Carter's, my rules. And tonight you die." Anthony muttered, "Guess we hit a nerve." Kelvin steadied his grip on a metal pipe. "Then let's show him what happens when Navy boys fight back." The standoff erupted. Molotov cocktails shattered against the walls. Flames devoured the warehouse. The Carters fought tooth and nail. Fists, pipes, raw survival. Harris fired his gun into the air, scattering attackers long enough to drag Evelyn out. Angela screamed into her phone, "This is live. Whitfield is here. This is all on camera." The world was finally watching. Just as they reached the street, squad cars screeched to a halt. But instead of rushing Whitfield, officers turned their guns on the Carters. "Drop everything." On the ground. Whitfield stepped forward, untouched by the flames behind him. His smile was cold, unshakable. You think cameras save you? I own the media. I own the law. And tomorrow, the headlines will say, Navy brothers die in fiery shootout. Kelvin's blood ran cold, because the rifles weren't aimed at Whitfield. They were aimed at him, Anthony, Evelyn, Angela, and Detective Harris. Dear viewers, just when the Carters thought they had proof, just when they thought the world was finally seeing Whitfield for what he was, the system revealed its darkest truth. Whitfield didn't just control a neighborhood, he controlled the narrative. As the police shouted commands, Anthony whispered to Kelvin, "Brother, this might be it." But Kelvin shook his head, eyes burning. No, this is just the beginning. And then, a gunshot split the night. The screen went black. The night froze with a crack of gunfire. Kelvin lunged instinctively, pulling Evelyn down behind a burning crate. Anthony spun, scanning for wounds. Silence. Smoke. Screams in the distance. Then they saw it. Detective Harris clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his jacket. "Sniper," Harris gasped. "He's got eyes on us." Whitfield's smug grin widened as the police tightened their circle. "This ends tonight," he declared. Evelyn clutched her rosary, whispering prayers under the glow of the flames. Anthony crouched beside her. "Mom, when we say run, you run. Don't look back." She looked at her sons, the boys she had raised into men. "No, if you stand, I stand. They dragged me once. They won't drag me again." Kelvin's heart clenched. Even bruised and frail, Evelyn Carter radiated defiance. It wasn't just the brothers fighting. It was the Carter family. Suddenly, headlights tore through the night. A pickup truck screeched into the fray, scattering officers. Neighbors, once silent, once afraid, leapt out, holding phones high, shouting, filming everything. One man yelled, "The world's watching. You can't hide this anymore." For the first time, Whitfield's smirk faltered, but his voice remained cold. "Fine. If they want a show, let's give them one." In the chaos, one officer lowered his weapon. He looked at the Carters, then at Whitfield, then back. He dropped his rifle. "I didn't sign up for this." Others hesitated, unsure. Whitfield roared, "To your jobs, or you're finished." But doubt spread like wildfire. Some officers backed away. Some still aimed. It was no longer a unified force. It was a fracture. Kelvin seized a moment. "Move," he barked. He, Anthony, Evelyn, Harris, and Angela sprinted through a gap in the police line. Bullets whizzed past. Sparks flew. They dove into the pickup bed. Tires screamed against asphalt as they tore into the night. Behind them, Lakewood Estates burned with fire and betrayal. They regrouped in an abandoned farmhouse outside the city. Angela uploaded fragments of the footage. Within hours, hashtags trended. Hashtag Justice for Evelyn. Hashtag HOA corruption. Hashtag Whitfield exposed. But Angela's voice shook. "It's not enough. He controls the narrative. He'll spin this. He'll say you're terrorists. That you staged everything." Kelvin rubbed his temples. "Then we need more. Something undeniable." Harris winced through his pain. "The files we grabbed, there's enough to implicate half the council. But Whitfield has backups. If he survives this, he'll bury us all." That night, Evelyn sat with her sons in the dark. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "But this can't just be revenge. It has to mean something. If you fight them, fight for more than me. Fight for every neighbor too scared to speak. Fight so no mother has to be dragged again." Kelvin swallowed hard. "We will, Mama. I promise." Anthony clenched his fists. "But first, we take Whitfield down." Through Harris's files, they discovered something chilling. A list. Names. Addresses. Dates. Every neighbor who had dared to speak against the HOA. Some had mysteriously moved. Others had gone silent. One was found dead in a car crash that never made news. Angela whispered, "This isn't just corruption. This is a hit list." Kelvin's stomach churned. "We're not just fighting Whitfield. We're fighting a machine." Days later, Whitfield held a press conference. Clean suit, rehearsed sorrow. Our community has been terrorized by two unstable Navy men. We mourn the chaos they've caused. We call for justice. The cameras loved him. The crowd applauded. Anthony nearly smashed the TV. He's painting us as villains. Angela clenched her recorder. Then let's flip the script. Angela arranged a secret live stream. Kelvin and Anthony stood before the camera. Evelyn sat between them, bruises still visible. They told their story. From the rope, to the beatings, to the warehouse, to the ambush. Angela uploaded documents live. Harris, face pale, confirmed the evidence. Within minutes, thousands watched. But just as Evelyn spoke, the feed cut. Static. Angela's laptop sparked. They traced us. Before they could flee, headlights flooded the farmhouse windows. SUVs. Men in black suits. Guns drawn. Anthony grabbed his rifle. They found us. Kelvin pulled Evelyn behind him. Harris muttered, "We've been sold out." Angela's eyes filled with tears. I told no one. But then Harris froze. His face twisted with realization. There's a mole inside the department. Someone higher up, feeding him everything. The farmhouse erupted in gunfire. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. The Carters fought like soldiers. Harris, wounded but determined, returned fire. Angela clutched Evelyn, shielding her. For every attacker they dropped, two more surged in. Kelvin's chest heaved. Anthony's hands bled. And then, in the chaos, a deafening blast. The roof caved in. Fire tore through the farmhouse. Dear viewers, the Carters thought the truth would save them. But truth has enemies. Powerful enemies. Ones who burn homes, silence witnesses, erase families. As flames engulfed the farmhouse, Evelyn's screams cut through the smoke. Kelvin clawed through debris, searching for his mother. Anthony shouted her name, but the roar of fire drowned it out. And then silence. When the smoke cleared, Evelyn was gone. Not buried. Not burned. Gone. On the wall, spray painted in black letters, one final message. She belongs to U.S. now. The farmhouse still smoldered when the Carters crawled from the wreckage. Anthony's arm was burned. Kelvin's lungs seared with smoke. Angela coughed violently, clutching her recorder like it was life itself. But Evelyn was gone. The word spray-painted on the wall haunted them. Kelvin's voice cracked. They took her again. Anthony punched the earth, his knuckles bleeding. We swore we'd protect her, and we failed. But deep inside, they both knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Detective Harris limped forward, his shoulder still bandaged from the sniper's bullet. They've escalated, he said grimly. Whitfield's not acting alone. He is backing, serious backing. Anthony snapped. Then name them. Harris hesitated, then pulled a crumpled file from his coat. Inside were photographs. City council members, a judge, a real estate developer, even a state senator. All of them tied to Whitfield's shell companies. He's not just running an HOA scam. He's building a political empire on fear and silence. Kelvin clenched his fists. And my mother is their leverage. 2 nights later, Angela uploaded another clip to the underground feed. She stared straight into the camera. Evelyn Carter is missing. We have evidence of her abduction. If anything happens to her, it's on Gerald Whitfield and his network. The video spread. Hashtags trended again. But with every share came more threats. Angela's phone buzzed with a text. You're next. She swallowed hard. Fear twisted in her gut, but her resolve held. While searching contacts, Anthony found a man named Thomas Blake, a former HOA treasurer who had mysteriously resigned 3 years earlier. They tracked him down to a dingy motel outside Jacksonville. Blake was thin, hollow-eyed, chain-smoking in the dark. I tried to stop him, Blake rasped. But Whitfield doesn't just find people. He ruins them. He buys judges. He pays off cops. And when that doesn't work, he trailed off, staring at his scarred hands. He disappears them. Kelvin leaned forward. Where would he take her? Blake's eyes flickered. There's a compound, old storage facility near the river. That's where they keep people until they're useful. The facility sat like a fortress on the water's edge. High fences, floodlights, guard dogs. Kelvin surveyed it with a soldier's eye. 2 entrances, 3 watchtowers, at least a dozen men. Anthony cracked his knuckles. So we go loud. Kelvin shook his head. We go smart. Loud gets her killed. But before they could finalize a plan, headlights flared behind them. A car pulled up. Out stepped a man in a tailored suit. Whitfield. Whitfield's smile gleamed in the moonlight. Still playing hero, Navy boys? You think this is a war you can win? I own this city. Your mother is alive. For now. But if you keep pushing, she won't be. Anthony lunged forward. Kelvin held him back. Kelvin growled, "Where is she?" Whitfield chuckled. "Ask the river. She might still be floating in it by sunrise." He slid back into his car. Tires screeched as he disappeared into the night. Kelvin's voice was cold. "He's bluffing. She's here. I can feel it." Midnight. The brothers moved like shadows along the fence line. Harris covered them from a distance, rifle steady. Angela whispered updates into her mic. They cut through the wire, slipped inside. Every step echoed like thunder. Every shadow felt alive. Anthony whispered, "This is too quiet." Then came the barking. Dogs. Guards shouting. Flashlights slicing through the dark. The compound erupted in chaos. Inside one of the storage units, Evelyn sat tied to a chair. Her lip was split, her wrists raw. She whispered prayers into the stale air. The door creaked. A guard stepped in. "Time's almost up, old woman." But before he could touch her, a hand clamped over his mouth. A knife flashed. The guard crumpled silently. Kelvin stepped into the light. "Mama, we're here." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I knew you'd come." Anthony cut the ropes, pulling her into his arms. "We've got you. Let's go." But outside, the gunfire began. They sprinted through the maze of storage units. Bullets sparked against metal walls. Harris covered them, shouting, "Go! I'll hold them." Angela ran beside Evelyn, clutching her arm. Anthony barked. "Left! The fence is open." They burst through the gap, racing for the trees. But then, floodlights roared to life. Dozens of men surrounded them, guns raised. And at the center, Whitfield. Whitfield's voice boomed across the compound. "You could have walked away, but you kept fighting, and now you all die here." He raised his hand. Guards closed in. "Evelyn, clutch your sons. Don't let them take me again." Kelvin's mind raced. Options vanished. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Anthony whispered, "Brother, if this is it." But before he could finish, a helicopter roared overhead. A spotlight blazed down from the sky. Masked men rappelled from the chopper, weapons blazing. Whitfield's guards scattered in panic. Kelvin shielded Evelyn. Anthony stared upward, stunned. "Who the hell are they?" One of the masked men shouted through the chaos. "Come with us if you wanted to live." Dear viewers, the Carters thought they had finally cornered Whitfield. But in that moment, a new player entered the board. Were they allies? Mercenaries? Another enemy bought and paid for? As the masked men dragged Evelyn toward the helicopter, Kelvin and Anthony faced the impossible. Trust strangers with their mother's life, or risk losing her forever. The rotor blades thundered. Evelyn screamed their names. And just as Kelvin lunged forward, the helicopter lifted into the night sky. The blades thundered overhead. Evelyn's screams were swallowed by the night sky as the masked men lifted her away. Kelvin reached helplessly, fingers grasping at air. Anthony collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. "Not again," Anthony whispered. "Not again." But Kelvin's eyes hardened. "No, this ends tonight." Angela traced the helicopter on her tablet, tracking its signal. It's heading north, toward the marshlands. Harris, grimacing from his wound, gritted his teeth. They're taking her to the docks. Whitfield has a private hangar out there. Kelvin's fists clenched. Then that's where we finish this. The brothers loaded up, exhaustion fading beneath a surge of determination. The docks stretched like skeletons over the black water. Floodlights glared. Crates stacked high. And at the center, the helicopter. Evelyn inside, struggling against her captors. Whitfield stood near the hangar, flanked by Dalton and Myers. His voice boomed across the night. You Navy boys never learn. This isn't war. This is business. And in business, leverage wins. He gestured at Evelyn. She's mine until you back down. You disappear, she lives. You fight, she dies. The masked men who had taken Evelyn lowered their weapons. One stepped forward, pulling off his hood. A scarred face. Cold eyes. Name's Mason, he said. Private contractor. Hired by Whitfield. Kelvin's got twisted. So this was never a rescue. Mason sneered. No, this is a transaction. She's a guarantee that you don't expose him. Angela streamed live from her phone, broadcasting every word. Millions are watching, she shouted. Say it again, Mason. Say it. Whitfield's face drained. Cameras had been his shield. Now they were his noose. Dalton muttered nervously. Boss! People were seeing this. Myers' eyes darted. We can't stop it. But Whitfield roared. Shut up and kill them. Chaos exploded. Anthony charged Dalton, fists hammering like thunder. Dalton fell hard, his smugness shattering with his teeth. Kelvin went for Mason, the mercenary striking with brutal precision. Blades clashed. Fists cracked. Myers lunged for Angela. Harris, pale and staggering, fired one shot. Myers dropped. Evelyn, bound and bruised, kicked a crate onto Whitfield's legs, sending him crashing down. For the first time, the tyrant howled in pain. Kelvin pinned Mason, disarming him with a final crushing blow. Anthony dragged Whitfield up by his suit collar. You dragged our mother like she was nothing. You built your empire on fear. How does it feel now? Whitfield spat blood, sneering even through broken teeth. You think this changes anything? There will always be men like me. Money wins. Power wins. And you? You're nothing but soldiers without orders. Kelvin's eyes burned. No, we're sons protecting our mother. And that beats your power every time. Sirens wailed. But this time they weren't Whitfield's men. Federal agents stormed the docks. Harris raised his badge weakly. I called them. Before tonight. Gave them the files. Agents swarmed Whitfield, Dalton, Mason, and the remnants of his network. For once, the cuffs clicked on the guilty. Angela's live stream had reached millions. The world had seen Evelyn Carter dragged, silenced, humiliated, and now redeemed. Weeks later, Whitfield's empire lay in ashes. Councilmen indicted. Judges disgraced. The HOA disbanded. Dalton and Myers faced charges for assault and kidnapping. Mason vanished into the prison system. Evelyn returned to her garden. Bruised, scarred, but unbroken. Her angel statue still stood. And beside it, a new one. Two brothers holding their mother's hands. Dear viewers, this story began with a rope. A rope meant to humiliate, to break, to silence. But instead, it bound a family tighter. Kelvin and Anthony fought not just for their mother, but for every neighbor too afraid to speak. For every victim of corruption, of intimidation, of power abused. Because justice isn't given. It's fought for. And sometimes it's fought with everything you have left. Evelyn Carter's story reminds us, evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it sits on a board. Sometimes it hides behind laws. But it always fears one thing, people who refuse to bow. So I'll leave you with this question, dear viewers. If it were your mother dragged with a rope, would you have the courage to fight back, no matter the cost? If you found this story interesting, make sure you subscribe, comment, like, and share for more.